Howdy, welcome to Communication Nation, and tonight's pressing matter, private data being sold by social media companies. As Jessica Gwynn said in her article about the trust in social media is in a free fall, 77% of Americans have little or no trust that companies will handle their mistakes and take responsibility for data misuse.
Yeah, so when I was researching about boundary turbulence often refers to disruption in privacy management, particularly in how people control their personal information and manage who accesses it. In context of apps, we're talking information, or they're gathering more information than they're saying they are, or they're sharing it without your consent. According to Del Wolf, there are also concerns about how TikTok uses this data to be sold or shared with third-party advertisers.
That's an interesting take, kind of to go off of that. From what I found from the textbook, Sandra Petronio kind of defined communication privacy management theory as a description of how people handle their private information. And one of the biggest principles was that our ownership of private information is essentially ours, and we're in control of that, right? And apparently, Petronio said that this means that we have that feeling of it's ours and ours alone, and we control who we give our private information to. Sometimes though, that's not always the case, because according to a study that was done from Hamad Alamri, their article going over Do the Right Thing, a privacy policy adherence analysis over the past 2 million apps in the Apple iOS store, it stated that, shockingly, 38.4% of those links were directed to actual privacy links that offer privacy information options and all that stuff. So over 62% didn't. And that's kind of an alarming rate.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's something that definitely needs to be acknowledged more.
And also adding into that, what I found is that the privacy boundaries actually start to get blurred whenever the person shares the information, or the user starts to share the information on these social networking sites, and it creates a co-owner, and that's where the boundaries get blurred, because this co-owner now also shares ownership of the information. And even though the original owner might feel that initial sense of property, that's not actually the case, because it can get spread. And also, according to Gia Hyan in her article over concerns over collective privacy on social networking sites, many of these users are worried of that exact reason, how the lines typically do get blurred when that information gets shared and diffused through other users.
So going into more detail about co-ownership and boundary coordination, when we share private information, it's kind of like handing someone a piece of a personal puzzle. So now both of you own that piece together. So you can kind of think of co-ownership like being co-captains of a team, both have equal stakes in keeping the team's strategies secret. So kind of about boundary coordination, you and your co-owner decide the game plan, but who else knows about your strategies and how strict you do to keep them under wraps? You're setting the ground rules together. An article by Patricia Sanchez says, the article is called Blurred Boundaries. She says that boundary linkage is the process of the confidant being linked into the privacy boundary of the person who revealed the information. So the kind of boundary linkage is the process of how it's all linked together. A couple key rules, I guess you could say, are a rule agreement, a commitment to the rules, and a responsibility assignment.
In addition to that, there are intentional breaches and mistakes, which is basically revealing private information intentionally and not just by accident. And so that's an invasion of privacy, which can be through ill intent or good. So kind of depending on what their end goal is, if they're trying to ruin a reputation or make it better. And then there are unintentional mistakes, which is spreading private information without malicious intent, but those still have remarkable consequences. And according to K.S. Wong's article, Trust and Privacy Exploitation in Online Social Networks, He states that there are two major types of attacks in online social networks. The first is accomplished by exploiting security loopholes in the networks, and the second is accomplished by abusing trust among users. The second type can sometimes be easier to accomplish because humans aren't always cautious, which I feel like goes hand in hand with the intentional breaches and mistakes, because we're always making mistakes.
That's a good point.
Well, there are a lot of things to critique this, but the main one is that communication privacy management is way too complex, and most of its ideas are not clearly explained, which makes it hard for people to understand and use. Specifically, it's unclear how people negotiate or simply agree on who gets to control shared private information. And CPM, Communication Privacy Management, emphasizes the importance of privacy in relationships and community dynamics, arguing that trust and well-managed privacy boundaries are essential for good interpersonal connections.
And kind of playing off of that, there's an article that's titled From Blockbuster to Big Brother, How an Increase in Mobile Phone Apps Has Led to Decrease in Privacy Under the Video Privacy Protection Act. And this is by Carly Rizzolo. And in her article, she says, the increased use of mobile phones and apps allows users to stay connected to the news, stream videos, and purchase goods or services, just to name a few users. However, it also uses videotape service providers, and other companies to take advantage of marketing opportunities to gain access to users' personal information without their consent or knowledge. So kind of when you mentioned boundary linkage, it's when you have your information and you share it with someone else, and now you both have the responsibility of who else gets to know that information. And it's important for phone apps, for phone companies, basically, when a consumer agrees to it, okay, how are we going to share this information? Who are we sharing this information with as well? And another aspect that the book talks about is the boundary permeability, and that's if you set your boundary linkage, is it going to be firm where the information does not get out at all, or is it going to be weak or thin and it allows all information to get out? And I think a way to solve this is by kind of what you said, is having our own responsibility for who we share our information with, and having that boundary set firm. So there's no third parties that are involved, because if you share your information, a company shares it with a third party, and then they share it with another third party, and it goes on and on and on, and your information is never safe. So I think it's good to make sure that when you're sharing information, it's safe, and then companies also inform the consumers saying, hey, we also share this information with this company, and they also might share it with that company. So I think that's a good way to solve the issue of how to deal with your privacy, is to, one, just be safe with who you share it with, and that the company lets you know what to do with it.
Absolutely.
It's definitely a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's all we have for today for this episode. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you in the next.